Gayl. Thank you for joining my show.
Thank you, Wenwen. Just wanted to make clear in the beginning that in this interview, I am sharing my opinions as a private citizen. They don't represent the views of my government employers.
Okay, let me ask my first question. About whistleblowing, why did you choose to retire this time?
Well, first of all, concerns that I had in the past, which were much different than this, and those relating to Taiwan Island now, they have one common motivation, and that stems from me being a Marine. And we should not sacrifice the lives of American patriots, whether Marines, soldiers, sailors, or airmen, for laws, policies, and special interests that are counter to our national security interests. And we've seen this pattern in the past, and we really shouldn't. We should learn from history and not repeat it. As for your question regarding retirement now, I want to leave while I still have an opportunity to start something new.
You think this is a revenge and made a repeal, but the investigation results of the U.S. Marine Corps say you posted multiple articles in our Global Times, which the U.S. State Department designated as a foreign mission. What's your opinion of this result?
Going back, I have felt compelled to disclose the dangerous Taiwan Island issue since I first researched and wrote on it in 2005. So this is nothing new. Those disclosures accurately predicted what is unfolding today. Over the years, I have written Presidents Bush, Trump, Biden, and recently the administration's national security team. I was fortunate to have one of my articles published in our Marine Corps Gazette, but my subsequent op-eds to U.S. papers were all rejected, and it was really the public that needs to hear these points. So my perspective has been ignored for many reasons, not the least of which is the fact that it comes from a random Pentagon bureaucrat. But the issue is urgent, and I reached out to Global Times, which caused my Pentagon removal and the initiation of an investigation. I saw no other avenue to raise the issues. My retirement scheduled for March 2022.
After you published a series of articles in the Global Times, have any U.S. officials or lawmakers got in touch with you?
In brief, no. Back in 2007, Senator Joseph Biden once championed better armored vehicles for warfighters engaged in combat in the Mideast. Reports that bureaucratic obstruction delayed their fielding, causing the unnecessary deaths of hundreds of Americans, confirmed his suspicions and certainly energized his efforts. The senator's fight for increased congressional fighting accelerated the deliveries, and it ended up saving many lives. He should definitely be commended for that. His support of me was also much appreciated at the time.
So only when U.S. media got to know you were investigated by the DoD did they publish articles about you and your viewpoints. Was the media attention within your expectation? Why do U.S. media outlets show little interest in the topic of the U.S. will lose war with China over Taiwan?
The early media treatment was predictable and did little to highlight the danger of war. Readers, as is often the case, are more interested and curious about, in this sort of circumstance where I'm a civil servant, my loyalties, motives. Why would I be doing this? Am I just looking for 30 seconds of fame? Am I sane? And those are human interest topics. It's sort of a morbid curiosity in a suspicious messenger, not in the Taiwan Island issue. Because to be taken seriously on something this important, this sensitive, and complex, it really requires China credentials and name recognition. And that I certainly don't have. Also, the idea that the U.S. would lose a war with China, or anyone else for that matter, was, and for many Americans is still inconceivable. However, the number of U.S. voices cautioning against a war over Taiwan Island, which I'm trying to encourage, is growing. In a Russia Today op-ed, U.S. Marine Scott Ritter warned that the U.S. cannot defend Taiwan, that China knows it. And he later restated his warning in a very important Global Times interview. U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Dan Davis echoed many of those concerns in a recent Guardian article. And it's noteworthy that Lieutenant Colonel Davis, several years ago, predicted our defeat in Afghanistan. And he was certainly an expert who would know. At a time, U.S. leaders were falsely reporting progress and sought to silence him. And here we are today. Precisely what he predicted happened. So he's a very authoritative voice. Those kinds of credible assessments, if no one's going to pay attention to my op-eds, that's fine. But credible assessments from such distinguished people should be read by our president before it's too late.
About Taiwan, between 1 and 10, how likely do you think a war would occur between China and the U.S. over Taiwan? And when could it be?
Well, first of all, when I am completely unqualified to speculate about the likelihood or timing of war. However, but in predicting military outcomes, it is normal for analysts to compare the physical capacities of the adversaries. And even that's beyond my expertise. It's not in my job type, those types of things. However, one thing I can say from research and writing is when it comes to Taiwan Island, it is the will to victory that is the most important measure, not necessarily the physical capacities. China's historically demonstrated tenacity and endurance on core national security priorities are well known to the U.S., given our country's rout by China in Korea, for example. Since Taiwan Island will always mean immeasurably more to China than the U.S., the outcome of war can be confidently predicted. The 3 joint communiques laid out path to peaceful unification of one China, which both nations, U.S. and China, sincerely believed would avert the current tension. But the U.S., frankly, and this is again my opinion only, I certainly don't speak for the government on this, but the U.S. undermined that path, first by passing the Taiwan Relations Act, 1979, and second by at the appearance of the DPP, by embracing the secessionist ambitions of the Democratic Progressive Party. With our apparent abandonment of the spirit of the communiques, China may find it necessary to unify by force. It's possible. Have no idea about the likelihood. But if the U.S. militarily intervenes, I think it's pretty safe to say that a total unrestricted war is pretty certain. Also, the likelihood that another sort of a problem, complication these days, is the likelihood that war is prematurely triggered by mistakes and miscalculations in the air and the sea and undersea surrounding the island is increasing. You know, history has many examples where unplanned incidents and accidents, they cascaded into major conflict. Regionally, the treaty entanglements in your region of the world are also similar to the pre-World War I European context. U.S. treaties with Japan, Australia, Philippines, and South Korea yes, they're between the U.S. and those individual nations, but they will be causally interrelated if conflict breaks out. And China's treaties with North Korea and Russia are similarly interrelated. You can't get around the connectivity between these arrangements. Some in the U.S. that I've spoken with in reading sort of downplay Russia's interest in the Taiwan Island conundrum. But the 2001 Sino-Russian Treaty of friendship constitutes an implicit defense pact. And in it, Russia states specifically that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China.
Okay, let's move on. What do you mean when you say the U.S.-Taiwan policy is hijacked by the military-industrial complex?
Well, first of all, the military-industrial complex, it's a very real phenomenon. It's not unique just to the United States. It exists in all highly developed, advanced nations with large militaries. In the U.S., the military-industrial complex has motivations in arms production and foreign military sales, in this particular case, that have little to do with the national interest or global stability. Arms industry profits earned by replacing obsolete weapons, weapons destroyed in war, with new ones constitutes what we call a gravy train for the U.S. defense industry. And we are an eager customer with deep pockets, the U.S. government is. And U.S. preparations for war with China also feed off of a safe, uninterrupted TRA business case that bridges periods of peace and war. The U.S. government, again, guarantees a loyal customer with deep pockets year after year. Whole of government and society practices of major defense contractors guarantee that weapons always compete well in the budget. Industry consolidation, which we've seen in dramatic form over the past few decades in the defense industry, makes the major defense contractors essential to the U.S. economy. And as we've spoken of in previous crises, too big to fail. We've seen that with banks and automobile manufacturers. So there's always a certain security with the U.S. government. The larger conglomerates also absorb smaller new entrants and along with their intellectual property. That's not unique to the defense industry, but it's certainly prevalent there.
What had the biggest lesson for the U.S. after the Afghan debacle in 20 years?
Well, this goes back to, I think a lot of these lessons were probably learned before this. For me personally, it goes all the way back to when I first started studying these topics, that the world is now multipolar, and America just can't set the rules for all nations. And we have to coexist with traditional and ideologically distinctive civilizations. Many have indigenous cultures and values that are different than ours. The Chinese and the Americans and the Russians and the Indians, and you could go on down the list. We are all righteous, good folks, good peoples, but we're different. We're fundamentally different, and we should accept that in each other. Also, the major antagonists worldwide are armed with nuclear weapons. I just named a few of them. Mutual respect between sovereign peer and near-peer powers is especially critical right now. You know, considering just the tension over the issue we're talking about right now. The imperial imposition of our ideals, we're not the only guilty nation of that over the centuries, but we have been. on other when we want to impose our ideals on other nations, it's unwelcome and dangerous. And in that sense, again, you know, I'm an idealistic American, and I love my country, and it's disappointing. Maybe it's not the world we want, right? We'd love to have it our way across the board, but in the nuclear age, even though it's not the reality that the U.S. wants, it's the reality we have. And from a realpolitik standpoint, it is best to recognize it. So from a pragmatic self-interest perspective, international harmony is much preferred to national hubris.